The city sleeps, but you do not. The streets are empty, the neon lights flicker, and somewhere in the quiet, you feel it, a persistent gnawing unease that follows you even into your most familiar spaces. It is not the kind of pain that leaves bruises or scars. It is quieter, more insidious, yet no less real. It is the pain you have been avoiding, the truths you have been running from, the emotions you have been trying to escape under the guise of busyness, distraction, or routine. You tell yourself that moving fast, keeping busy, or scrolling endlessly is protection. You think that avoidance is safety. But in truth, with every step you take away from your discomfort, a part of you slips quietly into the shadows. Most of us grow up believing that pain is something to be escaped, something that signifies weakness, something we must hide from ourselves and others. We are told to cheer up, stay positive, or just move on, as though human suffering is a stain to be scrubbed away. The world applauds the appearance of strength and vilifies vulnerability. And so we run, not from external threats, but from the inner storms we are too afraid to face. We run from grief, from shame, from the echoes of past failures. We run from ourselves. But what if this very flight is the thing that costs us our sense of wholeness? Every time we push away the ache inside, we dilute a piece of our authenticity. Carl Jung spoke of the shadow, that part of ourselves we deny, repress, or disown. The shadow is not evil, it is simply unseen, hidden behind layers of fear and avoidance. And yet, the more we run, the more it grows, influencing our decisions, shaping our fears, and quietly steering the course of our lives. The avoidance may feel like safety, but it is a false refuge. The walls we build around our hearts do not protect us, they imprison us. Think of the moments when you have felt a subtle emptiness, a quiet dissatisfaction, or an unexplained anxiety. That feeling, persistent and often dismissed, is the shadow knocking at your door. It is the part of you that has been asking for acknowledgement, for attention, for confrontation. Perhaps you turn to work, social media, substances, or endless distractions, trying to smother it. Perhaps you tell yourself, "I'm fine," while inside, something slowly unravels. Running from pain does not erase it. It burrows, hidden, shaping your fears, your desires, and even the choices you believe are freely made. The paradox is cruel. In avoiding pain, we risk losing the very essence of who we are. Pain is not merely suffering to endure. It is a signal, a mirror reflecting parts of ourselves we have denied. It is the whisper of our humanity, calling us back from the illusions we cling to, reminding us that life is not meant to be merely survived, but deeply lived. Avoidance may keep us comfortable in the short term, but over time, it erodes our self-understanding, our relationships, and our sense of meaning. We start to feel fragmented, hollow, as if pieces of ourselves are missing. And in that fragmentation, life begins to feel like a series of performances, each one masking the internal chaos we refuse to confront. Even as you read these words, the temptation to dismiss them, to look away, to think, "That's not me," may rise. That is precisely the point. Running is habitual, often invisible, a subtle form of self-betrayal we rarely acknowledge. Yet, acknowledging it is the first step toward reclaiming yourself. Facing pain is not a single heroic act. It is a series of quiet, deliberate confrontations. It is noticing the moments of discomfort without fleeing. It is pausing in grief, shame, or fear and letting yourself fully feel what you have long denied. It is sitting with the shadow, not to destroy it, but to understand it, integrate it, and ultimately, to be made whole. This is the threshold, the edge of understanding that your avoidance has a cost. The cost is not measured in dollars, accolades, or outward success. It is measured in authenticity, in connection, in the depth of your inner life. The parts of you that you hide or deny are not failures. They are invitations. They are the secret threads of meaning that, when woven into consciousness, allow life to feel richer, more alive, and more honest. The more you flee, the more you forfeit. The more you face, the more you reclaim. And so you pause. You notice the quiet ache. You stop running if only for a moment, and you ask yourself the difficult question, what have I been avoiding, and what have I lost in the flight? This is the beginning of a journey, a cinematic unraveling of fear, illusion, and avoidance. A journey into the heart of your own truth. A journey that will demand courage, patience, and the willingness to feel deeply, without distraction, without escape. Because the truth is undeniable. If you keep running from pain, you will keep losing yourself. Pain is not simply a hurdle to jump over or a shadow to hide from. It is a mirror, reflecting the deepest parts of ourselves we have long denied. When we run from pain, we are not just fleeing discomfort. We are fleeing reality itself. Human nature is wired for avoidance. From childhood, we learn to seek comfort, to protect ourselves from rejection, embarrassment, and suffering. We reach for distractions, compulsions, and conveniences that promise temporary relief. And yet, every diversion we embrace is a thread pulled away from our authentic self. The cost of this avoidance is subtle, almost imperceptible at first, but over time it accumulates into a profound inner fragmentation. Carl Jung, the great psychologist, described the human shadow as the unconscious repository of the traits we refuse to acknowledge. The shadow is not inherently dark or evil. It is simply disowned, ignored, and repressed. Every fear we suppress, every wound we refuse to sit with, every emotion we label as unacceptable, becomes lodged in this shadow, shaping the way we perceive ourselves and the world. The person who avoids pain may appear functional, even successful, but beneath the surface, the shadow grows, influencing decisions, fostering resentment, and generating unconscious patterns that sabotage authenticity. Viktor Frankl, in his profound exploration of human suffering, teaches that meaning emerges not in comfort, but in the confrontation with hardship. In concentration camps, he observed that those who found purpose amid the suffering, who allowed themselves to feel, reflect, and engage with their pain, were the ones who survived spiritually, even when the body was broken. Avoidance, on the other hand, is a surrender of that potential. By running, we refuse the opportunity to uncover the meaning hidden within our own discomfort. Pain, paradoxically, is the compass that guides us toward the life we are meant to lead. Friedrich Nietzsche's words echo this truth: what does not kill us makes us stronger. But strength is not merely resilience against external trials. It is the courage to confront internal ones. The pain we avoid is often emotional, relational, or existential. It may be grief over a lost connection, regret over choices unmade, or shame buried deep within our psyche. Yet it is precisely in facing these pains that we discover the contours of our inner world, the texture of our character, and the depth of our courage. To flee from pain is to remain on the surface of life, skimming endlessly across its waves without ever diving into its depths. Consider how avoidance manifests in modern life. We immerse ourselves in work, social media, or entertainment, believing that busyness shields us from discomfort. We distract ourselves with achievements, validation, and consumption, thinking that these will fill the emptiness we feel inside. But no amount of external stimulation can replace the inner reconciliation we avoid. The cost is cumulative. Unresolved grief morphs into anxiety, suppressed anger seeps into relationships, and the avoidance of shame perpetuates cycles of self-sabotage. Every ignored emotion is a shadow unintegrated, a fragment of self unreclaimed. This conflict between external comfort and internal truth is central to human existence. We live in a culture that glorifies control, convenience, and constant positivity, yet the psyche thrives in authenticity, confrontation, and acceptance. Carl Jung insisted that the path to individuation, the process of becoming whole, requires facing the shadow, embracing what we have long denied, and accepting the parts of ourselves we would rather reject. The philosopher's challenge is timeless. Life is not about fleeing suffering, but about transforming it into insight, courage, and self-realization. Imagine for a moment a person who has long avoided a painful memory, a betrayal, a failure, a loss. They go about their daily life seemingly unaffected, but the shadow lurks. It whispers in quiet moments. Anxiety in the night, irritability at trivial frustrations, dissatisfaction that no accomplishment can fix. Avoidance creates a false self, a mask that navigates the world while hiding the fractured interior. External success can coexist with internal erosion. The two are not mutually exclusive. And herein lies the danger. We may spend a lifetime running, believing we are free, when in truth we are shackled by unacknowledged pain. Philosophically, the tension is between the internal and external worlds. The external world offers distractions, obligations, and fleeting pleasures. The internal world demands confrontation, reflection, and honesty. To run is to privilege the former, to surrender to illusion. To face pain is to privilege reality, to embrace discomfort as a teacher rather than a tyrant. The courageous act is to move toward the very experiences we are conditioned to flee, to see our emotions not as enemies, but as guides illuminating the contours of the self. There is a rhythm to this confrontation, a flow that mirrors cinematic storytelling itself. First comes recognition, noticing the subtle signs of avoidance, the recurring patterns, the persistent dissatisfaction. Next comes acknowledgement, naming the fear, the grief, the shame, and allowing it to exist without judgment. Then comes engagement, sitting with the discomfort, observing it, and exploring its origins. And finally comes integration, learning from it, letting it shape understanding, and allowing it to inform choices rather than dictate avoidance. Each step is deliberate, each pause meaningful, each moment of courage an act of self-reclamation. Running from pain may feel safe in the moment, but safety is an illusion. Pain is inevitable. Suffering is part of being human. What is optional is our relationship with it. Will we flee, leaving fragments of ourselves behind? Or will we face it, however briefly, and begin to stitch together the fabric of wholeness? This is the philosophical core. Suffering is not the enemy. Avoidance is. Pain, when approached with courage and reflection, becomes a teacher, a mirror, a bridge to a deeper understanding of the self. And so, the stage is set for transformation. The tension between avoidance and confrontation, between illusion and reality, creates the cinematic landscape in which the self must be rediscovered. The shadow looms, the inner unrest persists, but awareness has been sparked. The question now is not whether we will feel pain, that is inevitable, but whether we will continue to run, or whether we will step into the fire, unflinching, and begin the journey toward integration, authenticity, and liberation. The moment arrives quietly, almost imperceptibly, like the soft glow of dawn creeping over a darkened city. It is the instant when you can no longer run, not because the world has trapped you, but because the inner weight becomes undeniable. The avoidance that once felt like protection now feels like a chain. And, in that stillness, you pause. You breathe. You face the shadow you have long evaded. Entering this fire is not a grand spectacle. It is subtle, intimate, and terrifying. You sit with grief that has lingered for years, with shame that whispers in every quiet moment, with fear that has kept your heart in check. Every instinct urges you to turn away, to distract yourself, to flee. But this time, you do not. You feel the ache fully, without judgment, without explanation, without apology. Pain is no longer an enemy to be vanquished, but a presence to be acknowledged, a language to be understood. In this confrontation, you begin to see the truth. The parts of yourself you have hidden are not weaknesses. They are invitations to wholeness. Cinematic imagery unfolds in your mind. A flickering memory of a moment you avoided, a long-buried regret, a failed connection. You see it, you feel it, and you let it exist. Viktor Frankl observed that even in the most unbearable suffering, one retains the freedom to choose their attitude toward it. You feel that freedom now. In facing what you have feared, in allowing yourself to sit in discomfort, you reclaim the agency that avoidance had stolen. Pain is no longer a tyrant. It becomes a guide, illuminating the contours of your inner landscape, revealing the architecture of your soul. The rhythm of transformation is deliberate and cinematic. First comes recognition, the clear sight of avoidance, the honesty of self-assessment. Then comes immersion, feeling without flinching, letting the wave of emotion wash over you. Next comes understanding, asking why the pain exists, tracing its origins, confronting the truths you have avoided. Finally comes integration, absorbing these revelations into consciousness, letting them reshape perception, behavior, and choice. Each step is punctuated by stillness, each breath a meditation, each heartbeat a reminder that life is to be lived fully, even in discomfort. Carl Jung's shadow is not a force to destroy, but to embrace. As you sit with your pain, you notice the hidden traits that have influenced your life. Anger, jealousy, fear, longing, grief. You realize that these are not flaws to expunge, but parts of yourself yearning for recognition. The shadow is a reservoir of untapped energy, creativity, and authenticity. By confronting it, you do not dissolve it, you integrate it. And with integration comes clarity, a sense of alignment between your inner and outer worlds that you have not felt before. Imagine a person who has spent years running from the trauma of rejection. Each failed relationship, each missed opportunity, each self-imposed isolation was an attempt to avoid the echo of that first round. But now, in a quiet room, they allow themselves to feel the grief of that rejection fully. They cry, tremble, and finally sit in silence. In that silence, something shifts. The fear no longer dictates behavior. The grief no longer corrodes identity. There is space to feel, to heal, and to reconnect with the parts of themselves that avoidance had obscured. This is the essence of transformation, the alchemy of suffering into insight, the turning of shadow into light. The narrative rhythm mirrors cinematic pacing. Tension rises as fear and discomfort swell. Every memory and emotion feels amplified. The soundtrack of internal dialogue crescendos with anxiety, resistance, and self-doubt. And then, suddenly, a pause, a breath held and released, a stillness that carries the weight of realization. Short, impactful thoughts pierce the mind. I am here. I am feeling. I am alive. In these moments, the self emerges not as fractured or fragile, but as profoundly present, aware, and resilient. Nietzsche's exhortation resonates. One must still have chaos in oneself to give birth to a dancing star. Chaos is unavoidable. It is the raw material of transformation. The pain you have avoided, the shadow you have denied, the grief and fear you have buried, all are elements of this chaos. To step into it fully is to begin the dance. Transformation does not erase pain, it redefines it. What once threatened to overwhelm now becomes the medium through which strength, insight, and creativity flow. Cinematic examples of internal struggle illuminate this process. You see yourself walking through darkness, each step hesitant, the floor uneven beneath you. Shadows flicker on the walls, memories and fears projected larger than life. You stumble, you falter, but you continue. Each step is deliberate. Each pause is an act of courage. And with every moment you stay, the shadows lose their grip. The darkness does not disappear. It becomes part of the landscape, no longer threatening, but a canvas upon which you paint a fuller, richer understanding of yourself. Transformation is also emotional. Vulnerability replaces numbness. Compassion replaces judgment. Courage replaces fear. And as these shifts occur, a profound clarity emerges. You are not defined by the avoidance, the failures, or the pain you once fled. You are defined by your willingness to confront, to feel, and to integrate. Every emotion, every shadow, every fragment becomes part of a coherent self. The fractured interior begins to harmonize, and the dissonance that once shaped your life starts to resolve. The ultimate insight of this section is simple yet profound. Pain is not to be conquered or escaped. Pain is to be understood, embraced, and allowed to teach. Every emotion we have hidden, every memory we have avoided, every fear we have denied carries within it the potential for growth, wisdom, and authenticity. Running prolongs suffering. Facing it transforms existence. In the cinematic theater of the mind, the scene shifts from despair to awakening, from flight to presence, from fragmentation to wholeness. And so, having stepped into the fire, having faced the shadow, having felt deeply without fleeing, a new self emerges. Not perfect, not free of discomfort, but alive, integrated, and profoundly awake. The stage is now set for the final act, the return to the world, carrying this newfound insight into everyday life, reconnecting with reality through the lens of courage, presence, and authentic engagement. The journey is far from over, but the self has begun to reclaim its lost territories, piece by piece, breath by breath. The journey does not end with facing the fire. Transformation is not a single moment, but a rhythm, a pattern that seeps into the very fabric of everyday life. Once you have confronted the pain you have been avoiding, once you have sat with grief, fear, and shame without fleeing, the world shifts subtly yet profoundly. Colors seem brighter, sounds more vivid, conversations carry more weight, and the ordinary takes on extraordinary significance. You begin to live with a whole self, not the patched, half-hidden version you once offered the world. Integration is not an abstract concept. It is practical, tangible, and lived. You notice the way your relationships change. The patience to listen deeply, the courage to speak honestly, the willingness to be vulnerable, all arise from the space carved out by confronting your own pain. You no longer react from avoidance or fear. Instead, you respond from awareness, presence, and authenticity. The work, the routines, the distractions, they remain, but their hold loosens. You engage with life intentionally, rather than reflexively, allowing discomfort to coexist with curiosity, courage, and compassion. The world outside remains unpredictable, often unfair, and sometimes harsh, but your relationship to it transforms. Obstacles no longer feel like enemies. They become teachers, mirrors of your internal state, invitations to grow rather than threats to flee. Pain is no longer an intruder, but a companion, quietly guiding you toward choices aligned with truth, meaning, and purpose. Viktor Frankl reminds us that suffering becomes meaningful when we choose how to engage with it. Living with the whole self is an enactment of this principle. It is the daily practice of facing what arises, integrating it, and allowing it to deepen life rather than fragment it. You recognize the subtle patterns in yourself, the urges to flee, the temptation to numb, the echoes of past avoidance. And each time you notice them, you pause. You remember the fire, the shadow, the confrontation, and you choose differently. The cinematic metaphor of your inner journey extends outward. The darkness is no longer to be feared, the silence no longer avoided, the difficult conversation no longer deferred. Life itself becomes a canvas for courage, patience, and presence. Each moment of authenticity, no matter how small, reinforces the reclamation of the self that has long been scattered in flight. This is the essence of living with the whole self, acknowledging that pain, fear, and discomfort are inevitable, yet refusing to let them dictate the shape of your life. You act from awareness rather than reaction, from truth rather than avoidance. You notice the richness of ordinary experiences, the warmth of sunlight on your skin, the sound of a loved one's voice, the texture of a page under your fingertips. Life is no longer a series of distractions, but a tapestry of moments, each carrying meaning, each offering an opportunity to remain present and authentic. And yet, this integration is not final. It is ongoing, iterative, and alive. There will be days when old patterns whisper, when the instinct to flee returns with force, when the shadow feels overwhelming. But the difference now is that you recognize it. You have learned the rhythm of engagement: pause, feel, reflect, integrate. The self is no longer lost in avoidance. It has been reclaimed through courage and conscious attention. Life becomes less about escape and more about full presence, less about performance and more about authenticity. Ultimately, the message is both simple and profound. Running from pain may feel protective in the short term, but it carries a hidden cost: the slow erosion of your true self. Confronting pain is the path to wholeness. It is the bridge from fragmentation to integration, from fear to courage, from illusion to reality. And as you step into this awareness, you realize that the journey itself is meaningful. Each encounter with discomfort, each confrontation with shadow, each act of presence strengthens the thread of authenticity woven through your life. The cinematic arc comes full circle. The streets where you once fled now feel alive, reflective, and intimate. The shadows no longer chase you. They walk beside you, integrated into the landscape of your being. The ache you once resisted is no longer a source of fear, but a compass guiding toward truth, purpose, and self-awareness. You are not invulnerable, but you are awake. You are not free from pain, but you are sovereign in how you meet it. And in this sovereignty, you reclaim what was lost: the self whole, courageous, and profoundly present in the life you are meant to live.